depending upon what frequency the HPM do is, as long as it's relatively low frequency, below 35 gigahertz, it's typically non-lethal to humans unless there's long exposure times. What we know as far as safety levels and all go is based on the IEEE RF radiation safety standards, which concerns the amount of not only the amount of average power, but the amount of dwell time. So generally speaking, since the pulses are very short and the rep rates are relatively small, the average power is not that high unless you have a long dwell time. On the other hand, as you may have heard, there's the U.S. Air Force Research Lab developed a system called the Area Denial System that the Joint Non-Lethal Weapons Directorate sponsored and carried forth. And that's a system that uses millimeter waves, roughly at 95 gigahertz. And they discovered that at 95 gigahertz, the energy can actually penetrate the skin and stimulate the nerves underneath the skin to give the simulation of a burn, of actually heating. As a result, that provides a way to control humans in a non-lethal way, because seems to be a significant difference between the threshold required to cause the intense pain and that for human damage. So this allows people, the warfighter and peacekeepers, to now have a weapon system that can actually radiate personnel to keep them back or to keep them from a certain area, such as protecting a high-value asset. And that pain will go away if they back off or if the energy is turned off. That's very important because that's a new application that appears to be of great interest, not only to the United States, but to our allies and unfortunately to our adversaries also. The last thing I'll say about that is that everybody says, oh, well, we can just easily protect against high-power microwave weapons by wrapping it in tin foil or something of that nature, creating a Faraday shield. The issue there is that in theory that is very easy to do. I mean, it's very easy to do theoretically, but it may be very difficult in practice, because it turns out where you put the shielding can redistribute the electromagnetic fields inside the target. And if you're not careful, you could actually increase the amount of energy at a particular place as opposed to trying to decrease it. The next slide just gives a cartoon picture of some of the applications of directed energy weapons as a whole. Those where you see red lines, they represent high energy lasers. And of course, high energy lasers is one of the major components of directed energy weapons. The high energy laser emits very high intense photons, light onto a target, typically in the invisible range, and is so intense that it can actually cause structural damage to a target in terms of the intense heat that it produces. The other systems you see there, where there are kind of little waves going out, that represents the HPM. In recent years, there have been tremendous advances in the laser community with high energy lasers, to the point that now they are actually feasible to be used in some air defense applications. Those are being looked at very heavily by all three services, and the Navy in particular is planning on actually installing a high energy laser on a ship for being able to protect against low-cost targets, swarm low-cost types of targets. The Army's very interested in that also and has plans, and the Air Force is also very interested in using lasers, possibly for not only base defense, but also for aircraft survivability against missiles. The main uses for high power microwave at current are those where you have a relatively short distance, such as countermine, counter IED, and also for the possibility of stopping vehicles with electronic engine control systems. Now there's also the fact that the HPM is looking very successful against being able to engage unmanned aerial aircraft and to disrupt their control and electronic systems sufficient to make them either catastrophically crash or to not be able to perform their mission. Next slide talks about what are some of